Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Chapter 5. Point of No Return. The room was silent for a beat after Loid spoke. Then Sylvia gave a slow nod. Her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp with something between admiration and regret. "Understood," she said. "You're sure?" "No," Loid replied, managing a small smirk. "But when has that ever stopped me?" Despite the gravity of the situation, a few of the agents exchanged glances. Even the scientist stifled a grin, though his eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement, like a kid who had just been handed a live grenade and told it was a toy. The lab assistant, a severe-looking woman with iron-gray hair, pursed her lips. "Dr. Halvitz, perhaps you should explain the full procedure to Agent Forger before we continue." "Oh yes, of course." Halvitz practically bounced on his heels. "It's really quite revolutionary. A combination of genetic modification, hormone therapy, and skeletal restructuring, all in perfect harmony." "Spare me the Nobel Prize speech," Loid said dryly. "Just tell me what I'm in for." Halvitz deflated slightly. "Well, in layman's terms, we're going to completely rebuild you from the inside out. Your genetic structure will be temporarily overwritten with a variant of Miss Forger's DNA, triggering a cascading transformation across all bodily systems. It's going to hurt like hell," translated the lab assistant bluntly. "Pain is a subjective experience," Halvitz corrected, adjusting his glasses. "Though I suppose discomfort would be an understatement." Sylvia stepped closer. "Once we start this, Twilight, there's no stopping midway. The chemicals will rewire your biology down to the cellular level. If we pull out halfway, your body could reject the changes. Best case scenario, you end up in a coma. Worst case, we bury what's left." Loid's smirk faded. "I understand." "Do you?" Sylvia's eyes narrowed. "Because what we're asking goes beyond duty, beyond sacrifice. This is your body, Twilight, your identity." "My identity," Loid said quietly, "has always been whatever the mission required." She studied him for a moment. "You know, we have agents who would have walked out the moment this was suggested." "I don't doubt it," Loid said. He glanced toward the observation window, where Yor still lay unconscious. "But she didn't walk away. And neither will I." There was a pause. Then Sylvia turned to the rest of the team. "Prep the lab. Let's make history. Wise Biolab, C, lower levels." 40 minutes later, the elevator ride was silent, save for the humming of machinery and the occasional sound of the scientist, Dr. Halvitz, muttering to himself while checking vitals on a tablet. Loid stood between Sylvia and a medical technician, his face stoic, but inside, his thoughts churned like a storm. "You'll need to be in a medically induced coma for the first 24 hours, Halvitz explained, breaking the silence. "The initial cellular restructuring is, well, let's just say consciousness would be rather unpleasant." "Unpleasant how?" Loid asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Your skeletal structure will be compressing," Halvitz said cheerfully. "Bone density reducing by approximately 15%, hip structure widening, shoulders narrowing. If you were awake, it would feel rather like being slowly crushed and stretched simultaneously." "Delightful," Loid muttered. "Oh, it gets better," the medical technician added with grim amusement. "Wait until he explains what happens to your reproductive system." "Oh, nee. I was saving that for dessert," Halvitz said, looking genuinely disappointed. The elevator doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a room that looked like something out of a science fiction nightmare. chrome surfaces, reinforced glass chambers, rows of chemical tanks glowing faintly with ominous blue liquid. "This is where the fun begins," Halvet said, far too cheerfully. "We'll begin with baseline scans, then start administering the first transformation vector. It'll begin by softening your cellular rigidity and preparing your body for the DNA overwrite." Loid raised an eyebrow. "Softening my what?" "Think of it like turning your body into wet clay," Halvet said helpfully, "and then sculpting it into your—" "Fantastic," Loid muttered. "Love being metaphorical pottery." "More like metamorphosis," Halvet's corrected, leading him toward a central platform surrounded by scanning equipment. "A butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Except the butterfly looks nothing like the caterpillar it once was, and might be stuck as a butterfly forever." "Your bedside manner needs work, Doctor," Sylvia said sharply. The medical team guided him toward a padded recliner surrounded by equipment that beeped and clicked with the precision of 1,000 unspoken warnings. The chair looked more like an execution device than medical furniture, complete with restraints and monitoring nodes. "The restraints are necessary," Halvitz explained, noticing Loid's gaze. "Even unconscious, your body will undergo involuntary spasms as the muscles reconfigure." "Spasms," Loid repeated flatly. "Think of it as an extreme full-body workout," Halvitz offered. "Your musculature will be reducing by approximately 30% overall, with particular focus on upper body mass. The deltoids, pectorals, and trapezius will undergo significant reduction, while the gluteal muscles will actually increase slightly." "You're telling me I'll lose my chest and gain an ass," Loid translated. "Precisely, and a quite shapely one, if Miss Forger is any indication. Her physical proportions are quite remarkable from a biological standpoint." "That's enough, Doctor," Sylvia cut in. As Loid sat down, she leaned in slightly. "I won't lie. This is the most extreme mission parameter I've ever signed off on," she said. "But if anyone can pull this off, it's you." Loid looked up at her. "Just make sure she wakes up," he said quietly. "She deserves to see this through, even if it's not her in the mirror." Sylvia gave him a rare, faint smile. "We'll do everything we can." Halvitz clapped his hands. "All right, let's get started. Strip to your base layer, Agent Twilight. Your new life is about to begin." Loid stood, took one last breath, and began to remove his coat. The fabric felt suddenly heavy, as if the weight of his decision had manifested physically. He methodically stripped down to his boxers, acutely aware of the clinical eyes watching him. "Agent Forger has a rather distinctive birthmark on her left hip," Halvitz said, consulting his notes. "We'll need to replicate that precisely. And the small scar on her right shoulder, knife wound, I believe." "Broken champagne glass," Loid corrected automatically. "Garden party in Prague 2 years ago." Halvitz looked up in surprise. "You're quite familiar with her physical markers." "It's my job to notice details," Loid said flatly, though he felt an uncomfortable warmth creeping up his neck. The lab assistant approached with a hospital gown. "You'll want this. The transformation begins with injection, but the later stages will require more space." "More space?" Loid frowned. "For the tissue redistribution," she explained matter-of-factly. "The boxers won't fit once your hips expand." "Right." Loid took the gown with as much dignity as he could muster. "Of course." As he changed, Halvitz began preparing a series of injections, vials of strangely luminescent fluid in varying shades of blue and amber. "The primary serum contains the genetic template," he explained, holding up a vial of deep cobalt blue, "extracted from samples of Miss Forger's DNA. The secondary compounds are catalysts and stabilizers." "And this?" Loid asked, eyeing a particularly ominous-looking red liquid. "Pain management," Halvitz said cheerfully. Though management might be optimistic. Pain acknowledgement might be more accurate. Delightful, Loid muttered, settling back in the recliner. The technicians immediately began attaching monitors to his chest, head, and limbs. Your vital signs will be monitored continuously, Halvitz explained, preparing the first injection. The transformation occurs in stages. First, cellular softening, then skeletal restructuring, then organ reconfiguration, and finally, external characteristics, skin texture, hair follicles, facial structure. And the other parts? Loid asked, keeping his voice clinical. Ah, the genitalia. Halvitz perked up. That's actually one of the most fascinating aspects of the process. The penile tissue undergoes complete inversion, with the nerve endings redistributing too. Just give me the shot, doctor, Loid interrupted. I don't need the play-by-play. The machine hummed louder. The lights dimmed, and the first vial of transformation serum was loaded into the injector. This will burn, the lab assistant warned, swabbing the inside of Loid's elbow with antiseptic. Like nothing you've ever felt. Loid's jaw tightened. I've been burned, shot, stabbed, and poisoned. I think I can handle it. She gave him a look that might almost have been pity. Not like this, you haven't. The needle slid into his vein, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then it hit. A wave of heat so intense, it felt like molten iron had replaced his blood. Loid's back arched involuntarily, a strangled sound escaping his throat before he could stop it. That's just the primer, Halvitz said, with clinical detachment that belied the fascination in his eyes. The main course comes next. Through the haze of pain, Loid felt the second injection. This time, the burning spread outward from his core, seeping into every cell, every fiber. His vision blurred, the world tilting on its axis. Heart rate elevated, someone called out. Blood pressure rising. Within acceptable parameters, Halvitz replied. Administer the stabilizer. A third injection, and suddenly Loid felt his muscles begin to tremble, not from pain, but from a strange, invasive sensation of movement, as if things beneath his skin were shifting, rearranging themselves. The cellular restructuring has begun, Halvitz announced, excitement evident in his voice. Remarkable, much faster than the animal trials. Loid tried to speak, but his voice caught. It felt wrong somehow, as if his vocal cords were already changing. Prepare the sedative, Sylvia ordered. He doesn't need to be conscious for this part. Just a moment, Halvitz protested. The data we could gather is not worth the trauma, Sylvia cut in sharply. Sedate him. Now. The last thing Loid saw before the darkness claimed him was his hand on the armrest. His fingers already looking somehow more slender, the skin smoother, as the transformation began its relentless progress. There was no turning back now. Chapter 6. The Unmaking of Twilight. The injector clicked into place with a soft hiss, and Loid watched as the vial of pale blue serum drained into the central feed line, hooked to his IV weight. The liquid flowed like liquid mercury, oddly hypnotic in its smooth progression through the transparent tube and into his veins. All right, Dr. Halvitz said, eyes dancing between monitors and a secondary screen. Serum is live. Vector A is integrating. You'll feel a bit of warmth. Maybe a tingle. No pain. At least, not yet. Loid raised an eyebrow. Not exactly comforting. Would you prefer I lie? Halvitz adjusted his glasses with a flourish. I tell you it'll feel like being massaged by angels while unicorns sing lullabies. Pass, Loid replied dryly. Just give it to me straight. Oh, come now. Compared to most of our field agent procedures, this is practically a spa day. Remember that time in Belgrade when we had to remove that tracking device from your spleen? Don't remind me, Loid muttered. I still can't look at fondue forks the same way. The warmth hit almost immediately, not a burning sensation, but a deep, slow bloom that radiated from his chest outward, like standing under sunlight that gradually intensified until it felt like it was seeping into his bones. It spread through his torso in pulsing waves, each one reaching further than the last. He shifted slightly on the padded recliner, flexing his fingers. Feels odd. Like I'm overheating from the inside. Perfectly normal, Halvitz chirped, tapping on the tablet. Your body's metabolic rate is increasing. We had to accept a slightly elevated temperature as a side effect. It's the only anomaly we couldn't eliminate. It helps speed up cell division and reprogramming. Think of it as your entire body booting into an upgrade mode. Great, Loid muttered. I've always wanted to run hot and get less muscular. The heat is actually a fascinating side effect, Halvitz continued, either missing or ignoring Loid's sarcasm. Miss Forger naturally runs about half a degree warmer than average. Something about her metabolic efficiency probably helps with her assassinations. She does tend to wear more layers than necessary, Loid observed absently. Even in summer. Compensating for the extra thermal output, Halvitz nodded enthusiastically. Brilliant adaptation. Loid could feel the warmth intensifying now, concentrating particularly in his chest and hips. A strange tingling sensation began in his fingertips, spreading slowly up his arms. Oh, don't worry. We're not turning you into a noodle. Just softening the corners a bit. Define softening, Loid said, eyeing the steady drip of the IV. The scientist consulted his tablet. Well, your muscle fibers are currently being restructured at the cellular level. Men typically have thicker, denser muscle strands, good for explosive power. Female musculature tends to be more layered, with greater elasticity and endurance. So I'll be weaker, Loid translated flatly. Different, Halvitz corrected. Miss Forger can still break a man's neck with her bare hands. You'll just do it with more finesse. One of the medical technicians, a stoic woman with steel gray hair, approached with another syringe. Phase 2. Catalyst, she explained, injecting it directly into the IV port. This will accelerate skeletal remodeling. Almost immediately, Loid felt a deep, gnawing ache begin in his bones, starting in his spine and radiating outward. Not quite pain, but the unmistakable sensation of things shifting that shouldn't be shifting. There it is, he murmured, his voice tight. The unicorn lullabies. Your vertebrae are compressing. Halvitz explained, watching the monitors with rapt attention. Fascinating process. The bone matrix is simultaneously dissolving and reforming. Oh, spare me the Discovery Channel narration, Loid interrupted. How long until this part is over? 3 hours for the primary skeletal restructuring, the technician answered while Halvitz pouted. Then we begin soft tissue remodeling. Lovely, Loid said. Can't wait for the sequel. He leaned back and closed his eyes, the warmth now pulsing in waves. Despite the surreal nature of it all, it wasn't unpleasant, just unnatural. He could feel his body working beneath the skin, beneath the muscle, like 1,000 tiny decisions were being made without him. The sensation intensified as the hours passed. The subtle ache in his bones grew sharper, more insistent, particularly in his hips and shoulders. He could feel his frame shifting, contracting in some places, expanding in others. His shoulders narrowed almost imperceptibly, while his pelvis seemed to swell with a dull pressure that made him shift uncomfortably on the recliner. Try to stay still, the technician advised. Movement can cause misalignment. Easy for you to say, Loid muttered. Your hip bones aren't rearranging themselves. Would you like something for the discomfort? She asked, one eyebrow raised. Loid shook his head. I need to stay alert. I want to understand what's happening. Admirable, but foolish, she replied. The next stage will be considerably more intense. As if on cue, a wave of sensation rippled through Loid's chest, a peculiar tightening followed by a feeling of weight being redistributed. He glanced down and saw that his pectoral muscles had begun to soften, the firm planes giving way to a subtle curve. Mammary development, beginning right on schedule, Halvitz noted with clinical enthusiasm. The breast tissue will form gradually over the next 12 hours, with full maturation by the 48-hour mark. 12 hours of growing breasts, Loid said flatly. That wasn't in the training manual. Few things worth doing are. Agent Forger. 7 hours later. Observation chamber. The lights were dimmed to reduce sensory overload. Loid sat upright now, sweating lightly, wrapped in a thin blanket. A mirror had been deliberately left out of the room. The blanket clung to his body differently now, the contours beneath it subtly altered in ways that sent a disconcerting chill down his spine. Vitals are within parameters, Halvitz said, scanning the data. Phase 1 complete. Structural rebalancing has begun. Loid shifted his weight and noticed it immediately. His center of gravity was subtly different. Lower. Lighter. Each movement required recalibration, like learning to walk after months at sea. This is disorienting, he admitted, adjusting his position again. His voice sounded odd to his own ears, not dramatically higher, but softer somehow, with different resonance. He stood, instinctively stretching, and paused. His head didn't brush the overhead medical scanner anymore. The blanket slipped slightly, and he caught it reflexively, suddenly aware of the unfamiliar weight on his chest. Not large, but unmistakably present, the early development of breasts, small but distinct mounds that pulled at his skin, with gentle insistence. Christ, he murmured, pulling the blanket tighter. Sylvia entered silently, observing from the doorway. Her eyes widened fractionally, the closest thing to shock her face ever displayed. You've lost about 3 inches, Halvitz confirmed, glancing up. Muscle mass has dropped around 17%. Bone density is recalibrating to match yours proportions. Still strong, of course, just sleeker. Sleeker, Loid repeated. Is that the scientific term? Would you prefer more curvaceous? Halvitz suggested with a grin. Your waist has already narrowed by 4 centimeters, while your hips have widened by nearly 3. Loid shot him a withering look. I can feel the difference, thanks. He could too. His stance had naturally adjusted. Weight shifted slightly to accommodate the new distribution of mass. His thighs felt fuller, pressing against each other in a way they never had before. And there was a strange emptiness between his legs, not complete transformation, but a definite retraction. The first stage of what Halvitz had clinically described as genital inversion. Loid flexed his right hand. His fingers looked the same, but his wrist had narrowed slightly. His reflection in the polished chrome of the equipment showed another change. Streaks of black had begun threading through his blonde hair like ink in water, starting at the roots and extending outward in dark ribbons. He murmured. Guess I'll need to update my passport photo. The melanin reconfiguration is proceeding at an accelerated rate, Halvitz noted, making adjustments to his tablet. Hair follicles respond particularly well to the genetic rewrite. By tomorrow morning, you should have Miss Forger's full coloration. Loid reached up to touch his hair, then paused as he caught sight of his arm. The muscle definition had softened noticeably. The skin smoother with a subtle translucency, that hadn't been there before. He flexed experimentally, still strong, but the visual impact was dramatically different. Your skin will continue to refine, Halvitz explained, noticing his examination. Female dermis is approximately 25% thinner than male, with a higher concentration of subcutaneous fat. Gives that characteristic softness. You make it sound so clinical, Loid muttered. It is clinical, Sylvia interjected, stepping closer. Don't lose sight of that. This is a medical procedure, not a metamorphosis. But it felt like a metamorphosis. With each passing hour, the person he had been was being systematically dismantled, cell by cell, and reconstructed into someone else entirely. Sylvia stepped closer. You're adapting fast. Better than we expected. Loid gave a wry smile. Well, I've always been a quick study. The physical changes are only the beginning, she reminded him. Tomorrow, we start voice modulation and behavioral training. I know how Yor behaves, Loid said, with unexpected defensiveness. I've lived with her for over a year. Living with someone and being them are entirely different, Sylvia replied. You know her habits, her routines. But do you know how it feels to walk in heels for 8 hours? How to adjust your gait when your center of gravity is completely different? How to modulate your strength when opening a door or shaking hands? I'll learn, Loid said firmly. Yes, Sylvia agreed. You will, because you don't have a choice. She glanced at the monitors. The next phase begins in an hour. Facial restructuring and full secondary sex characteristic development. It will be intensive. She means it's going to hurt like hell, translated the gray-haired technician, not looking up from her clipboard. Your skull is about to rearrange itself. I've had worse, Loid said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. But even as he joked, something in his chest tightened. It wasn't just his body changing. It was the quiet realization that piece by piece, Twilight was being taken apart, and something else was being built in his place. For what it's worth, Sylvia said quietly, pausing at the door, you make quite a striking woman already. Lucky me, Loid replied, with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've always wanted to be pretty. As she left, he caught another glimpse of himself in the chrome surface, his face softer now, cheekbones more prominent, jaw less defined. The ghost of Yor already visible beneath his features, emerging like a photograph slowly developing. He stared at the strange hybrid reflection, neither fully himself nor fully her. Halfway between identities, between genders, between lives. And the transformation had only just begun.